Hey everybody, my name is Willie Martinez, and I'm a Latin percussionist, but I'm well known for bringing my abilities on Latin percussion to the drum set, the American drum set. So I'm here to talk about that tonight. Um, I'm really excited because it's something that I'm really passionate about. I, um, I really love percussion in general, but I love the drum set. The American drum set is actually a relatively new instrument. It was created around the turn of the 20th century. Um, it was originally used not in the form that it's used now. Like when you look at a drum kit, as I'll show you later, because I have some other things I want to show you first. But when we look at the drum set, it's made up of several different drums. You have a bass drum, you have a floor tom, you have a mounted tom, and then you have various cymbals, hi-hat cymbals that come together, and then cymbals that sit on stands rather. So all of these things originally were individual players played each of these instruments in a marching band, because that's originally where the tradition of drumming comes in the Western world. I mean, the history of drums in Africa and all over the world is quite profound. It goes back to the very, very beginnings of mankind. But when it developed in the 19th century, drums were played, a bass drummer played the bass drum, and a snare drummer played the snare drum mounted from a strap, and the same thing with tom-toms, and cymbals as well were clanged together with handles. So the whole concept of combining them to make one instrument is relatively new. It's relatively new. It came when the creators of jazz, the forefathers of jazz, started using the instrument to create a groove for this new music. And so it became necessary for all of these sounds to work together. So then early kit drummers found ways to surround themselves with each of these instruments and make them work together. So it's a very interesting story, and it's kind of akin to the story I'm going to tell you today about how I approach the drum set in terms of Latin music. Um, Latin music is, for me, it's something that I'm so passionate about because the rhythms are the polyrhythms are just so exciting and so moving. You know, they make your body move. And that's what I love about them, and their history. They come from their, as I said, a lot of the instruments that I'm going to show you tonight have their roots in Africa, and they made their way to the Caribbean during the North Atlantic slave trade. And when they landed in places like Cuba and Puerto Rico and Santo Domingo, the Africans who were brought to these islands were allowed in many instances to keep their drums, or at least to make instruments to replicate the drums that they had left behind. That was not allowed in the United States. In the United States, the drum was taken away from the slaves because the slave owners knew that the slaves were using the drums to communicate. And that's another one of the original purposes of a lot of percussion instruments, especially from Africa, is that the natives used them to communicate with each other because the sound of a drum could travel for miles. So in the United States, the instruments were taken away, but not in the Caribbean. So that's an important thing because it allowed African traditions to continue over the centuries, and instruments that originally came from the continent of Africa, they morphed, they changed and evolved in the New World, but they're still their home is Africa. Good example is the conga drum. To my right, or hopefully to your right or your left, but the two tan drums that are standing to my right are called conga drums, and they come from a region in Africa called Congo. And originally they were used these pegs that were hammered down to basically tune them. And now in modern times, you have keys called lugs that draw the skin down that allow you to change the tuning of the drums. So that's a modern take on the original conga drum. And then another sibling of the congas is the bongo, which also comes from Africa. These are two small drums that are held together with a piece of wood. I'm going to demonstrate their sound when I start getting into the conversation of the languages these drums speak. Then I'll bring them a little closer so you can see them better. And then last but not least, my favorite instrument, which is the instrument that I started playing when I was 10 years old, and that's the instrument in the middle called the timbales. And the timbales are very special. They come out of the timpani, believe it or not. They were used when, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, when the Spaniards had their dance balls where they would gather and they would dance together. The music that they made was rather classical in sound. The music that was played was danzons, and they were very proper dances that were danced to these rhythms. And so the timpani were a part of that, and later the timbales were created out of imitating the timpani. And so that's why they have the look that they have. One thing again in my discussion with you this evening, what I want to really explain to you is how I bring all of these instruments, these percussion instruments, to the American drum set. Because in playing Latin jazz, sometimes it's great when I do have a percussionist working with me, but that's not always the case. So I need to be able to evoke the feel of these instruments by myself on the drum set. And that to me is like actually the exciting thing about being a drummer is when you have all of this freedom to basically explore the languages or combine the languages of each of these instruments. So let's take a look at the congas. I know that you visited with Wilson Chembor Corniel a couple of weeks ago. He's a master conguero, he's a master percussionist. But the congas is kind of the center of his universe, and he's such a gifted player. I am not such a gifted player on this instrument, but I can at least show you some basics on how I brought them to how I brought their voices to join the drum set. Okay, so I'm going to step over to the congas, and the basic groove or pattern that the congas make is called tumbao. And tumbao sounds like this. So the congas have a role. Each one of these instruments, when they play along with each other, they have their own little pattern that comes together with the other two to create one basic wall or wave of sound. So the congas creates this tumbao. It's kind of the foundation of the triumvirate, you know, the three drums together, three instruments together. Next, we have, I'll introduce you to the bongos. The bongos are an instrument. So these are the bongos. And as I said, there are two drums, two small drums, that are bridged together with a piece of wood. And one thing I should mention is that the bongos have a male and female aspect to them. The smaller of the two is the male aspect, the macho. And the larger of the two is the female aspect of the instrument called the hembra, la hembra. So the macho and the hembra kind of have a dance in the way they speak together. I'm going to step back a little bit so you can see my hands a little better. And the pattern, as I mentioned before, with the congas, the pattern that's played is called tumbao. And the pattern that's played with the bongo is called martillo, which means hammer in Spanish. And I guess the reason that, it's called the martillo is that when you listen to it, it does evoke the tapping of a hammer. So the martillo played with the two drums sounds like this. So that's the martillo rhythm that the bongo player plays when he's playing the bongo, or she is playing the bongo. Next, I'm going to show you the timbales. So if you can imagine the martillo playing while the conga player is playing the tumbao, then your timbale player has rhythms that he plays or she plays or they play in on different parts of this instrument. This is, again, the instrument I've been playing since I was about 10. And it has a couple of components. You have the side of the drum. It's a metallic instrument, so it has a metallic sound when you tap the sides. The baila, that's what the sides are called, the baila. And you have the skins, because these have skins as well, so just like a tom-tom on a drum. And they sound, and this instrument also has a male and female aspect in the same way that the bongos do. Your smaller drum is again the macho, the male aspect. And the larger drum is again the hembra, the female aspect of the instrument. So when you play the skins, not only can you hit them in one place, but you can hit the same drum in several places. So you have two basic sounds. I mean, there are several, but the two main sounds that you get out of the macho, the smaller drum, is a rim shot. And then when you strike the center of the drum, you get a more muted sound that's not as sharp. So the two sound like this. And then although you can do a rim shot on the hembra, it's not usually typical. I mean, it's done, but the main beauty of this drum is the big sound that it has. In their festive occasions, the danzón was an extremely popular type of music to play. And the role of the timbales is quite beautiful in the danzón, in that it's like a march. And you use your hands to mute the heads, and then there are open tones and muted tones. So I'm going to play a little bit of danzón for you, because I think it's just a gorgeous rhythm that the timbales plays. That's just a little bit of a taste of what the kind of song sounds like on the timbales. Now, one thing that and then let me talk about the rhythm that's played on the side, because that's a specific rhythm as
Hey,
well.
Willie.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, Willie. Yes, sorry to interrupt your lesson. Sometimes when you're hitting the drums, it kind of gets canceled out. I think it might be your mic overcompensating for this echo.
Oh, the compression is kicking in probably. All right, so
Yeah.
that more on the timbales than anything else.
Uh, yeah, I think it happens on when you struck it. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe if you want to, you have for the interruption again.
No problem, no problem. I'll spend more time on other instruments, so that way we're not interrupted with the compressor interfering with the broadcast. Sorry for that. But I think I will be able to at least let me know if I'm able to continue with the cowbells, because that is part of what I want to continue talking about.
Will do.
The side of the drum is which is called the baila. There is a rhythm plate called cascara, and it sounds like this. And that would complete the trio in terms of the conversation that these three instruments have with each other. The conga being the tumbao, the bongo being the martillo, and the cascara rhythm on the side of the baila. Now, also, there is a further layer of participation in sound that the timbal has with the bongos. And that's that when the timbali player is playing the side, the cascara, there is also a bell pattern later in a piece of music. When the energy starts kicking in a tune, the timbali player would then move from the side of the drum to the cowbell. And so the cowbell would sound like this in that case. I'll start playing the cascara rhythm and then move to the cowbell. So that's like a pattern that would be played on the cowbell by the timbali player when the music starts getting to the next level of energy. So to show you what the bongo player would do then is in the same way that the timbali player would move from playing on the side to the cowbell when the energetic part of the music comes, the bongo player would then put down the bongos, or sometimes they keep them between their legs, but then they would pick up the handbell, their bell, because they have an accompanying bell with an accompanying pattern that goes along with that bell. And it sounds something like this. So that bell that's played by the bongo player, that pattern would be a pattern that locks with the pattern being played by the timbali player on the timbales. So now that you have kind of a basic understanding of the three rhythms that the congas and timbales and bongos play together in unison when there are three individuals playing them, I'm going to show you how I kind of made my way to bring all of these instruments together in the American drum set. Which I think to me is just a whole bunch of fun because it allows me to basically combine all three onto one instrument, and it's a lot of energy. Before I move all of these instruments out of the way, one thing that I want to make mention of is later on when I get on the drum set, I'll show you that the snare drum has a very interesting role in playing grooves in jazz, and then later on in Latin jazz. And in a lot of ways, the snare drum emulates a lot what the bongo player does. Because remember when I told you that the bongos has that rhythm, the martillo? There's also within the context of the martillo, there's also like this conversation that the bongo player has with the melody and with the basic groove of the music, and that's called repicando, repicar. Repicando is like riffing. You know, the bongo player will riff while playing the martillo rhythm. So if I'm playing the martillo, conversation that the bongos have. And later on, when I started embracing Latin rhythms on the drum set, I knew that what was happening on the snare drum was akin to this repicando on the congas. So I'm going to move some things out of the way so that you can get a better look at the drum set. 2 seconds. I'll put the bongos over here. Cheers. I'm going to move the timbales out of the way. Let's see if we can tighten up the or look at the drums. Okay, so the drum set, as I mentioned, has several components. You have cymbals, and you have hanging toms, and you have a bass drum, and then you have a floor tom that you might not be able to see, and then you have your hi-hat, which simulates a marching drummer clanging the cymbals together. And then you have different types of sticks that you can use to make sound on a drum set. I'll come a little closer so you can see. You generally have your drumsticks, and then you have what are called mallets. Mallets have these soft pads on the ends that give you a muted sound when you're performing with them. It's a really lovely sound on the drum set. And then you have brushes, which again is another really, really nice way of playing the drums. It gives you this really interesting sound that I'll demonstrate to you. Now, one thing I will say is that when I was showing you the congas, there is a rhythm called guaguancó. And I'll just drag them back over here for a quick second just to demonstrate that. Basically, you have this pattern that you can play on the drums that's really, really beautiful. And that guaguancó rhythm is something that I thought when I was starting to explore how I wanted to bring Latin rhythms to the drum set. I said to myself, that's really a very anchoring type of rhythm. It's like a real foundation. So what I did is I said, I wonder if there's a way for me to imitate that on the bass drum. Since the bass drums are kind of our foundation in a lot of ways. So the same way that I would have played that rhythm on the congas, I played both drums on the bass drum with this pattern. So, and then also, when the conga player plays the tumbao that I showed you, there's a slap in that rhythm. So that slap that comes on beat 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's something that I simulate on the hi-hat to kind of create that slap feel. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is already giving me like a groove foundation. So that way I have a lot of the voices that are happening on the conga are now happening with my 2 feet, my left and my right. My left foot playing the hi-hat on 2 and 4, and my bass drum playing the guaguancó rhythm on the 1 drum. So next, I wanted to start incorporating the timbal sound. The timbal is the sound that the timbal makes with the foundation, with the bass drum and the hi-hat. So when the natural thing to do is to imitate the cascara rhythm that I showed you on the timbales and bring it somewhere where it feels natural for me to play. So since I'm used to playing this rhythm with my right hand on the side of the macho timbale, it kind of like dawned on me that it would be comfortable to play on the side of the floor tom because the floor tom sits to my right, and it's a larger drum than the macho on the timbale, but it still has a very similar sound. So that is the 3 sounds so far playing. One thing that's a very, very important part of Latin music is a rhythm. It's also an instrument called the claves. The claves are 2 pieces of wood that together create a clave beat, which sounds like this. So that sound, that rhythm, marries perfectly with what I'm doing so far with the bass drum, the cascada on the side of the floor tom, and the hi-hat. I'm going to play that so you can appreciate how it all starts coming together. So things are starting to get really, really full. You're hearing all of these voices speaking at the same time, and it's not babble, it's a conversation. Everything is in the pocket, as we musicians say. It's all happening together in a seamless feel, all together. So that's one thing that starts feeling really, really good when you're playing Latin jazz alongside a piano player, a bass player, and horn players. When all of this starts cooking together, it has a really, really nice sound. Now, if you remember when we were looking at the timbales, we start our tunes usually playing the side of the drum. That's kind of the common part of the tune. And then as the tune picks up energy, we kind of switch to the cowbells, right? So the same thing is the case here. You may not be able to see them from this vantage point, but I have cowbells mounted to my bass drum. To the same cowbells that I had on my timbales, a cha-cha bell, which is a small little bell, and then a mambo bell, which is what I played the cascada pattern on earlier when I was demonstrating that on the timbales. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually transition from playing cascada to the bell now so that you get an idea of how that sounds. So that, when the music starts gathering more energy, you go to the cowbell. Now, I want to just move away from Latin music for a quick second to just talk about, I'm eventually going to get to the whole, how this all gets brought together in Latin jazz. But for you to understand Latin jazz, I think first it would be good to have a brief discussion on jazz music itself. Jazz is also a relatively new music, again, happening in the late 19th century, actually the early 20th century. James Reese of Europe, when he brought his Harlem Bell Fighters to Europe for the first time, they were experiencing basically the first movements of jazz for the first time, and that was during World War I. So this music has been around a while, but not around as long as others. But it is America's only original art form. It's the only art form in the United States that was created here on these shores and not imported from somewhere else. So that's something for us to be proud about, that we are that jazz is our national art form, and it's a native to here. And it's since traveled all over the world and has been influenced by all types of things like Latin jazz, Brazilian jazz, all types of cultures have embraced jazz. And basically what jazz is, a big part of jazz is the improvisation that goes along with the jazz melodies and harmonies. When you speak of iconic composers like Duke Ellington and Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis, they created these beautiful melodies that have very rich chordal texture, very, very rich harmonies. And when you combine those melodies and harmonies with Afro-Caribbean rhythms, takes them to a whole other place. But before we go there quite yet, I want to just demonstrate what's normally played on the drum set while playing jazz. So this is a basic jazz pattern that I'm going to play on the drum set so that you can get a feel for what it sounds like. Basically call that spang-a-lang. Spang, spang, lang, spang, lang, spang, lang. So that's your basic jazz beat. Now, do you remember when I talked to you about the bongos? And the bongos had its rhythm, the martillo, but it also had this kind of more improvisational language that it speaks during the martillo, where it ventures off into other rhythmic patterns that are very, very much off the cuff. They're very much improvised. So that's a lot like jazz. In jazz, the snare drum has kind of that role of interacting with the melody and with different musicians, kind of like a call and response. So it reacts to things that are going on in terms of the harmony, the melody and the harmony and the rhythms. So I want to demonstrate that real quickly. That's called comping, or it's like an accompaniment, and I think that they kind of like squish the word down to comp, from accompany to comp. And basically, it's the concept is you're playing. Off of the spang-a-lang groove, off of the basic jazz groove on the cymbal. But if there was a horn player here or a piano player, and they were taking a solo and they had different rhythmic movements happening, I would interact with these types of movements between the tom-toms or even the floor tom and the snare drum. And it really, really does kind of, to me, emulate the role and the activity of the bongos in while playing Latin music. In its most basic form. And then when we go to Latin, another level of energy that we haven't gotten to yet is the cymbals. So in jazz music, you kind of start with the cymbals. You have the cymbal beat. And in Latin music, you also can remember the way that we brought the cascara rhythm from the floor tom, or actually from the timbales, we kind of migrated it here to the floor tom and then to the cowbell, and then we can migrate it once again to the cymbals. So I'm going to demonstrate what that sounds like. So what's really, really cool is that we have this foundation going on with the bass drum and the hi-hat, and then you have this other rhythm that's just basically hovering above it, and it all comes together in this one kind of groovy little suit, and it really sounds really great all together. And in the same way that the jazz drummer is comping on the snare drum and the tom during solos and such, the same thing happens with the drums if you're playing in a Latin situation. So I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of the comping that I may do when I'm playing with a larger group, when I'm on the cymbals and I get a chance to stretch out a little bit more. It would sound like this. this foundation. Then you have the little rhythmic pattern that goes together. Foundation, get our little groove going, and then the energy just keeps on escalating. One thing that I love doing on the American drum set, as you know, the snare drum has a snare sound. It has wires on the bottom, and it gives you this sound. So originally, again, from the marching tradition. But it also has a mechanism on the side called a strainer. That which strains the wires to basically create this snare sound. But you can actually turn the snares off. And when you turn the snares off, you have an open sound. And remember how we had on the timbale, we had a rim shot and a muted sound in the middle. And then a lot of times I'll treat my snare drum like the macho on my timbales. And then even though the drum is not to my left, it's right in front of me, I'll use my hanging tom to simulate the hembra. And so that kind of comes in handy, and it allows me to emulate that. Before, when I was playing the danzón rhythm on the timbales, for technical reasons, the sound of the timbales was kind of overpowering the microphone. But I'm going to try to do something that's really one of my favorite things to do, and that's play the foundation, the bass drum, and the hi-hat, and the little cascara, and then take a solo over the foundation. So I'm kind of accompanying myself. In a typical rhythm section of 3 people, you would have a conga player playing tumbao. You would have the martillo being played by the bongo or the cowbell, depending on what part of the suite he's in. And then you'd have the timbales, again, playing the cascara or the bell. And they would be playing together. And if one of them wanted to solo, then the other 2 would be supportive to them. They would basically hold down the rhythm while whichever the third instrument would solo. So if the timbale player was taking the solo, the conga player would be holding on rhythm along with the bongo player. And also, conversely, if the conga player was taking the solo, the timbale player and the bongo player would hold down a groove. So that way the conga player could stretch out. And then if the bongo player is taking the solo, the other 2 would be supportive to the bongo player. So here, I'm by myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little solo while I'm playing the rhythm. And so you can get a chance to see how I do all of this by myself. Again, we're going to start with the foundation. basically how I bring it all together on the drum set. I simulate or I replicate the various drum rhythms from the congas and the bongos and the timbales, and I kind of migrate them here to the drum set and find drums that kind of have a way of embracing those vocals together. So, and between the four-part coordination that I have with my limbs, my two arms, my 2 feet, I can kind of get this whole groove thing happening that would normally happen with 3 musicians, and I can make it happen with 1. So I think that's really, really great stuff. I'm going to move a little closer to the microphone, or rather to the screen. It's been really a pleasure to join you this evening and talk about all of this. I'm very passionate about it, and I really love these instruments, and I love particularly when I get on the drum set and I'm able to bring all of that together. I'm going to check and see if maybe we have anything in the chats that we do. I'm going to get my glasses so that I can see. Embarrassing. Oh, you're right here. Okay, so we have 2 chats. When you play the instruments, the echo cancel kills the sound. Yeah, that is an issue in this room, I'd imagine, because I'm in a very large room that is kind of like a huge echo chamber. So it is kind of an issue, but at the same time, it's the space that I have available to me. I don't know if we have any other questions, but if not, then I'm going to say good night to you and leave you with the wonderful folks here at the New York Poets Cafe. If you're interested in learning more about me and what I'm doing, you can sign up for my newsletter at williemartinez.com, williemartinez.com, and you can go there and hear and learn about more of what I've got going on. I have quite a few things going on. So thank you very much for joining me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you. Hopefully, I think in October, there's another date that I'll be joining you again. So I'll look forward to that. Thank you so much.